Hello and welcome and Happy New Year. It is now 2022 and it's time for something new. And one of my viewers, Fluffy Bunny, asked if I would kindly consider doing some tutorial videos about watercolor and total beginner stuff. And I'm not super good at doing tutorials, but the only way to get better is by doing it and trying. So here we go again. And I asked Fluffy Bunny what would be a good place to start because it's easier to start from somebody's question than me just trying to make up what is probably helpful or maybe not. So Fluffy Bunny told me, well, it's a problem to mix colors on a palette because this person has a tendency to make it too washy, wet and washy, and it's just washed out. So that's how to mix colors on the palette. And we didn't talk about palettes as specific, but there's basically two types of palettes. There are flat palettes and there's weld palettes. And then there's the ones that are on the side of a tin like these. They are flat and somewhat a little deep too. Um, and they can be used as an all-rounder, those in the tins. But I'll use these two palettes to explain two different concepts. And then there's also a question of materials. This one is porcelain and this one is a plastic palette. And some people hate plastic palettes. And that is because if you use them, they sometimes or most times do something called bead up with colors, and it is mostly when they're new and unused. See, when I put paint on there, it crimps up into a bead of water with pigments in. And why is that annoying? Because one could say, hey, it doesn't take up much space on the palette that way. But it is difficult to gauge what intensity of your color you got in that paint because that bubble of water there is much thicker than the paint will be once we painted it on the paper. I just swoosh it forth and back like this, and where the water film is the thinnest before it beads up, that's approximately the color you can expect to have on the paper. So this would be a kind of like a light turquoisey color. Um, so let me grab my paper, and it is my brand new Irish 310 Viking paper I'm using. It's 50% cotton, and my absolute favorite at the moment. It's brilliant. So you can see that that's fairly close to what it looked like over on the the palette. Now I got this intensity there. If I dip my brush in water, I add more water to it, and it gets lighter. Not a whole lot, but some. Can also do it on directly on the paper while the paint is still wet. So every time you dip your brush in water and you go and paint on, you lighten that wash up. So I suspect that while mixing colors, one might say, okay, so we take some paint, and I know I'm using this space because it doesn't beat up so bad. So here we got that. It was a phthalo blue, but it got a little turquoise because it got contaminated by the color next to it. I'm trying to pick out as much as I can here. Can I also squeeze paint out of the brush with a finger? Because I need to fill that up again. Good, so we got that turquoise color there. And Then I rinse my brush because let's pretend I'm a neat painter. And see, I have a cloth here, or paper in this case, and I'm checking if my brush is clean. Okay, so we go and we pick up more paint here. Take this beautiful yellow-green from Van Gogh. So here we have a bright green now. And maybe I want more of one or the other color. Now I have no more blue, so I have to go with more green. And yeah, I just dipped right in. But what most people would do is like we have this mixture, and so I don't want that up in to contaminate my color, so I wash my brush again. And I'll go in again. Now this brush is now fully loaded with water, and if you just want like a little bit of color, all that water in the brush is gonna give off more water there and thin it down. So if you already have a wet paint and you maybe only want a little, then dry your brush off a little bit before you pick up more paint. That way you don't thin it down every time you have rinsed your brush. I think that's one of the things that probably happens to some beginners because they really don't want to contaminate their paints. So now we got a green here. The flat palette is good because if the paint doesn't beat up too bad, it's easy to figure out what color you got there. You can paint it out in a thin layer and see what you got. So the problem is if you're wanting to make a large painting, and you can already see here because I was dipping in water and thinning it out, this one up here is not even in color. And I don't have enough of this green to cover all the way over to the other side of this page. So if I wanted all that to be that color green, I would have had to mix some more paint than I did. I can try and stretch it a bit with some water, but it will be the same as up there where it gets lighter over in this corner because I added more water. So what to do in that case? And here is where the weld palette is good because we can just add some clean water to that. That was about a milliliter or so, and then we can pick up some pigment from whatever where you want it from, and you can mix up a big batch of paint. It's often a good idea to maybe make it a little lighter than you want. And now I don't have that blue anymore, so we just go. But I put a lot of that green gold in there anyway, so for large areas where you want it to be the same color everywhere, a wash is a really good idea. Or if you, for some other reason, know you're gonna use a lot of that color. Now you can make washes and paint with washes only. So you have whatever many wells you want or cups or anything that can hold some water and some paint. You just make up a whole bunch of washes or and paint with them because if we let this dry, we can just glaze over again. This was a rather strong mixture, so let me try and make one that is somewhat weaker. There's some blue there that I did the other day. Now, to that I add 3 milliliters of water. The syringe is fantastic tool. So now we have a light blue wash here. Let's see what color that is. It's kind of greenish because I didn't clean my brush. Never mind. It's an okay color. So it's gonna be super uneven because I I got green in my brush. So if you think it's too light after the first wash, let the paper dry and go over it again. And this kind of disappeared because it wasn't proper dry. And is that a drying edge or a cat hair? That was a drying edge. So if you touch wet paint to wet paint or semi-wet paint, it will bleed together. You can see here, you can clearly see where I painted the first stuff and where that stopped. That was dry, so I washed over it and you can see the contours of my first wash. Up there, it bleeds a little bit. This paper is not good for bleeding too much, so it might be okay for starters. But yeah, if you have a light wash of especially a darker color, and you let your paper dry and you go over it again with another layer, it will look darker. At least if you got proper color watercolor paper. If you have something with too much sizing on it and it's maybe a full cellulose paper, the problem is that if you then try to glaze over, it might lift the first layer off and make a mess. But this is 50% cotton, and it holds its paint quite well. So yeah, those are the two different ones. And let's just try and let this dry. And here I have an example where I used too much water compared to the paint, or I tried to fix something while the paint was still wet. So that's why I have all this backwash and stuff here. Way too much water and onto something that was already painted. Not a good idea. Same here. If it's something you want as an effect, then it's of course okay, but I wanted a even brown hill here. But it's not a totally loss. I can still correct this. I'll just paint over it again and then kind of see if I can get this to move. That is art, making mistakes, correcting them again, see if you can maybe incorporate what is your mistakes into your painting. Maybe make your mistakes into a painting style. I can't really paint on this still because it is a little damp. So while things dry, we can talk about brushes. And let's just say I got enough. Let me close this and put that up there. So here is a selection of all kinds of brushes in all kinds of price ranges. This is my old, I actually learned to paint with this one and brushes of the same type. This is a Chinese goat hair calligraphy brush, and it is kind of worn, but if we put water in it, it still comes to a decent point. I don't use this anymore. I got it because I'm nostalgic. In its days when it was new, it was a good centimeter longer and came to a very fine point, and it holds a ton of water. Today I actually find it a little difficult to paint with because it holds so much water. But the calligraphy brushes is actually really interesting to use. They especially if you get goat hair. Goat hair is kind of a favorite of mine for nostalgic reasons, and one of the very, very few natural hairs that I actually like to paint with. I just haven't found a new Chinese brush yet. Then we got something that came in something. I got a couple of them, and these are lousy. I don't know what brand they are. Can't read that. Doesn't really matter. It's a 0 and a 2. those are detailer brushes, and if we wet them, you can see that they don't really want to come to a good point. And the little one, let's see if we can keep it. It has a thing where if you pull on, let me put this underneath. If you pull on it here, you can see that it has some short hair and some long hairs, and the long hair is not in the middle. So this has a tendency to make kind of side lines if you hold it this way here and try to paint with it. Those long hairs tend to stray out to one side like that, and then you can't see it that it's split. It splits off, so it makes like a double line, and it's totally random when it splits and where it splits. It also tends to, if you can see it, you can bend it to one side and it stays there. That is also not a fantastic feature. And this one also has a really lousy point and it tends to split as well. So those are really useless, inexpensive brushes. It's a waste of resources to have made them because if you try and paint with them, you'll probably just be very frustrated with the results. It is some kind of natural hair. I just don't know what it is. It is not something that is normally used for brushes, that's for sure. Then there's a whole host of specialty brushes. Let's see if I can find them all. And then one has a brown handle there. So here we got a rake brush. It has some long hairs and some short hairs. And this brush is fantastic to paint like grass or long fur with if you want to make markings. But is it a beginner's brush? No, it's not. Is it anyone's brush? I don't know. I got it and I hardly ever use it, so not necessarily a good beginner. Here is, I think it was called a dagger brush. It's triangular. Don't know if we can film it. Yeah, you can see it's triangular, and then it's cut from this edge and like that. So it sprawls a little bit. It's one I bought from Jackson. It's a silver line. It's an interesting brush if you are doing stuff where you use the mark making of the brush for painting. Some folk art brush floral painters use that and stuff. I don't know how to do it, so I don't get the most out of this brush. It mostly just frustrates me. Fan brush looks like very neat when it's dry, and then it gets really funky when it gets wet. Again, okay for making foliage on landscapes, trees, bushes, grasses, long fur on animals, things like that. Also, not really worth buying as one of your first brushes. It's something you can buy if you got money and you got everything else. For beginners, I'd say any type of rounds and flats and some detailers, some small ones. Now I picked up here a size 12 brush, and it's a mop brush that comes to a point. It's fairly okay. This one is best to cover large areas with or make large gestural strokes with. If you're painting small paintings like I do from A4 and down, it is a bit much, but it's good for covering large areas. Flats are good too because the flat side here can cover a large area and very easily and quite evenly, and you can hold them. You should always look at them wet, by the way. If you hold them on an angle like this, you can make beautiful lines. It's really easy to make good lines with actually a flat on its side. It's way easier than doing with a detailer or any other round brush. Detailers, they're just small. I'd say from size 6 and down, and have a couple of them. Probably size 0 is the smallest you should go. I got a 3.0 here, and it holds very little water, and the number has gone off. So a size 0, a size 3, and a size 5 rounds, and some 8 or +8 is good. And then a couple of flats of your choice. Match the sizes of your brushes to whatever you're painting. This is largely the sizes I use most times. A whole array of detailers, a couple of flats. One is, I think this is a 1/2 inch, and that is a 1/4 inch type of thing. And then there's this one. This is a filbert, but it's a special filbert. It is my Da Vinci Cosmo spin, and I can show you its big brother. It comes to a point like that, and it's flat. This one I bought because I wanted a bigger brush, but it is this one I find myself using all the time. This has kind of the... It can be used the same way as use around for details and stuff, because it comes to this super, super fine, flexible point, and you can use it in any way you want. And you can put it down flat, and you can make broad strokes with it. So it's a really, really good brush. Now this one, it's a series 5584. 5584 is the series of these. I'll just double check on that one. It's a little larger printed. Yeah, 5584. It could be your only brush. That is a size 10. That is good for the size of paintings. I do A5 and smaller. And this one is good for larger paintings or broader, bigger areas. The thing about these two brushes is that they are not cheap. They are quite costly. So that's the drawback of that. The quills this is from Jackson's. It's the Icon series. I got 2 of those. Those are brilliant brushes, but if you struggle with water control either in color mixing or in your paintings, those are maybe more for intermediate to experienced painters, because they hold a ton of water. They don't give it off too quickly. It's a mixed hair, synthetic and natural hair, I believe, brush. I love them, but they're maybe not the easiest to control. I am a big fan of synthetic brushes and mixed hair brushes. There are something about brushes made of marten and squirrel and things like that. If it's made of small animals, you can be sure those animals are well dead before the hair is taken. And since few people eat squirrel and even less marten, I think that's kind of a waste. I don't mind. I'm not a vegan person or anything, but if we kill something to eat it or to use it, we should use up the entire animal as much as possible, and not just kill him for a few tail hairs. So that's an opinion, and if you love marten and squirrel hair brushes, I'm not gonna complain. I'm just not buying them. That's all. I got a little bit of an opinion on that, and I also don't buy them because I don't like how they work. I don't like how they give off water, and that's the thing. All different brands and series of brushes will have different fibers for bristles, and all I can say is go buy something and try it. For detailers, I actually prefer to use this. This is an A and B detailer. This is my size 6, and I got them from 6 and all the way down to 3.0. And I like these because they don't hold a ton of water, so the risk of you picking up some paint and leaving a bit blob on the paper is not very high, and it gives off water in a good pace. And it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't hold too much. It's also then easier for mixing with if it's a brush that doesn't hold lots of water. If overwatering things is a problem for you. Some people, if you ask people about brushes, you will get a different answer depending on what person you ask, and that is because brushes is such a personal thing. It has to match how you work, and I find it super hard to recommend things for people because I don't know what they want to do. If you want to do lots of wet stuff, you need some big brushes that holds lots of water, that you can do some good big washes on your paper with that. And then for that, this size is brilliant for small paintings because you can cover the whole page before anything dries. But if I should say a good beginner brand that is available many places, I'd say Cotman. Sears, the one with the blue handles, they are really good. You can get them in different shapes and sizes and stuff. And I've had mine for a long, long, long time, most of them, and they have just held up to whatever I've done to them. Um, let's just admit that I was not a very skilled painter when I bought most of them, and I have been really hard on them. But they still work, and if you make sure to dry them well and you don't get too much pigment up in the top half of it, then they will last you a long time. And if you get a mixture of rounds and flats, you're well off. All the fancy ones there, specials and daggers and angles and whatever else we got, they're fun, but not necessarily particularly useful. So I have now spoken for nearly half an hour. So let's just have a quick look at some. This one is probably the most dry. There. Need my cup. About storing your brushes. Now we're at brushes. You can see I'm keeping mine in a mug and with top up, of course. If you have wet brushes, it's a good idea to let them dry flat or upside down if you have something you can hang them in. And that's because you don't want, especially super wet brushes, you don't want to put them upside down because the water gets in here and dissolves the glue that holds the bristles in and the ferrule on the handle. So just if they're just semi-dry, it's okay to stand them up. Just don't want to put a soaked brush upside down or top up. I gotta pick a couple of brushes too, and I keep these around not because I paint with them, but because I need some crappy brushes to show off sometimes. So let's see. We got two washes here, a blue and that one goes over there. So there was one question also about how to harmonize colors. And I think the best advice I can give in a video of this length is make some kind of background wash to start with. And pick some kind of a neutral color, a gray or a brown or a muted color of sorts. And make it not too, this is a bit much. Make a good thin wash. If you don't have a weld palette, find a little cup or something that you use only for painting and make your wash in there. Because that color will show through everything you do. You can paint on top of it and the color will still be, now this is a greenish color. It will still be green, but because it's transparent, the brown will show through a bit.
and that means that that brown will show through all of your colors in the entire painting, and that will harmonize the painting. There are other methods that includes color wheels, and there's, or at least understanding of color wheels, and there's different techniques. But I think that is something I could do in a video all by itself. I can talk about color mixing and color theory for a very long time. I can put people to sleep with that stuff. So I think we covered pretty much the basics here. If there's something that was unclear, or you just think of a question, please post it in the comments, because I do read them. I don't have so many subscribers that I can't reply to my comments. I usually do eventually, and I do read them all, and I appreciate each and every one of them, in case you didn't know. Thank you for watching. I hope this was useful, and please like, subscribe, and come back again. Bye.